choices. The fun and the privilege of mentoring 6 interns that I personally selected for the Hockey Canada website at that tournament. One of them, by the name of Diran Mahibon, went on to become a full-time sports writer. Moved out to Toronto, and we stayed in touch, and we would exchange tips, and I would let him know how things were going with his writing. So one day out of the blue, I see that Diran has landed a byline in the New York Times, which is awesome. So I wrote to him and said, hey, congratulations, buddy. And by the way, what's the name of the editor? And he handed it right over, because he's a great guy. And I sent him a pitch about international hockey, which is my specialty. And I've been writing for the Times ever since. You know, sometimes it's just that simple. So put yourself out there, because you don't know how it's going to come back to you in the long term. Key number 6, inject a personal touch. If you can avoid writing generic material like the top 10 restaurants in Las Vegas, please do. It's better for your soul, and I believe ultimately better for your bank account as well. Personally, I like to bring a lot of humor, a lot of quirky touches to my writing. When I toured Israel in 2012, I wrote an article for the Vancouver Province that started off, like heavy metal music, the Middle East can be hard to understand. Both are notorious for colorfully dressed, hirsute men who loudly proclaim their message, while their followers raise their fists and explosions go off. And I then worked in references to cultural icons like Iron Maiden and Guns N' Roses. Now, what about you? Maybe humor isn't your bag. But there are other ways to inject that personal touch into your writing. Talk about traveling as a senior, as someone with a disability, or perhaps as a volunteer, or a culture vulture. You know, whatever stirs your soul, try to put something of yourself into the article. Don't make it an article that everybody else in this room could do in their sleep. I've seen great articles that are all about reconnecting with family in the foreign setting, and those two elements come together, and that's what brings the piece alive. Bottom line, if you can write an article that nobody else can write, you're giving editors one more reason to bring you on board. Key number 7, don't be afraid to recycle. Now, when I say recycle, I'm not just talking about selling reprints, although that is a nice weapon in your arsenal. I'm saying don't hesitate to dip back into the archive of notes and photos that you take from other trips. Because you know how it is, if you've been in this business for a while, you can just start kind of surfing from one trip to the next, and you get 1 or 2 or 3 stories out of a trip, and then it kind of goes into the archive, and you don't go back there. But there's so many cases where, especially if you're dealing with natural rather than urban settings, or even smaller towns where things don't change that much, you can go back to that source material over and over again. And it feels good to know that nothing's going to waste. Case in point, in 2006, right here in BC, I canoed the Bowron Lakes Canoe Circuit, and I did an article for the Rocky Mountaineer Onboard magazine. Cut to 2010, 4 years later, I was invited to contribute to a new book called Frommers Far and Wide, a weekly guide to Canada's best travel experiences. And I definitely wanted to include the Bowron Lakes because I was doing the BC content. So I confirmed that White Gold Adventures, the operator who took me out, was still in business. I was like, oh, thank God, finally I get to use this pithy quote that Dave Jorgensen, my guide, used that didn't make the Rocky Mountaineer piece. I had some good stuff on bears, beavers, muskrats. You know, now I'm in business, and I take a lot of notes. Like, I mean, when I went to Easter Island, I must have taken about 11,000, 14,000 words in notes. So everybody's different, but most of us have some kind of fun we can draw on. You know, like the material you gathered before the 2014 FIFA World Cup in Brazil can often be recycled in some way for that feature before the 2016 Rio Olympics. You can do articles where you're comparing and contrasting destinations you visited. And the other nice thing about recycling is that it shortens your turnaround time, which is a plus for editors. So please recycle. I know I shouldn't have to say that because we're in Vancouver and we're all such tree huggers, but do it. Key number 8, act like a pro, get treated like a pro. But this is one of my favorite principles of all time for writers. And if you follow it, you will find yourself crafting successful stories on your own terms over and over again. And that's because editors love to work with writers who are low maintenance and deliver the goods. I haven't talked a lot about my earlier career here, but I'm going to go to the origin story a little bit here because hockey. I'm going to just illustrate how acting like a pro was something that helped me to move things along a whole lot faster than they probably should have for both sports writing and travel. One of my goals when I moved from Victoria to Vancouver way back when was to get into covering hockey. Now, those of you who follow sports know that usually when you're a sports reporter, start out at the bottom, cover some Pee-wee games, then you move across the country to cover junior or college, and then finally you come back to the big city to cover the pros or the Olympics. I was able to accelerate that. I started out from day one with my chosen sport with the National Hockey League. So how did I pull this off? Well, I got on the internet and I found a website that was called the Pro Hockey Euro Report, specialized in Europeans playing in the NHL. Being half Finnish and half Canadian, this had always been an interest of mine. I read some of the articles on the website and I found a page that said writers wanted. And they were looking for correspondents in Atlanta, Boston, Chicago, and Vancouver. Now, there was no pay, but this was a really early stage in my career. I was still looking to get my foot in the door. So I put together an article with some analysis of European hockey players, making it as tight, clean, and professional as possible. And I made sure that the style corresponded exactly to what they did on the website, including the way that they did the date line. It had to be exact. And then I just sent in that article along with a note on my education and writing background, and I said, I want to be your guy in Vancouver. Euro Report got back to me right away. And they said, great, we are going to apply for credentials with the Canucks so you can start covering games and practices. The Canucks said yes, and I was in. So, long story short, I spent over a year interviewing superstars, the Marcus Naslunds and the Igor Larionovs, and total unknowns, and writing these articles for free, building up a portfolio. And then I got my big break. One day, February 2000, my editor told me that he had been contracted by the International Ice Hockey Federation to supply content for the upcoming World Hockey Championship in St. Petersburg. They were doing an event-specific site, and he said, do you want to go to Russia in 2 months and be the editor of the website? I was freelancing, so I said, yeah, I think I could arrange to do that for sure. So 2 months later, I did that tournament, and I've covered every single World Hockey Championship since then. So what that means in practice is that I spend several weeks every year in beautiful European cities like Stockholm, Vienna, Prague, and I go to the Winter Olympics every 4 years. So all this obviously opens the door for me to do more travel articles while I'm on site. I'll be going back to St. Petersburg and Moscow in May, which is going to be fun, bringing me full circle. So my point again is, you act like a pro, you get treated like a pro. And really, as writers, it's what's on the page that counts. That's what's going to get you in. We're in the internet age, and you can just move yourself up the ladder so fast if you have attention to detail. Doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter how many previous jobs you've had, it's about the quality of your writing. You make it top notch. Even if you're blogging for free, you approach it like you're doing it for New York Times. Just show that you care, not just about your content and your research, but about everything else, spelling, grammar, punctuation, because editors don't like to edit. They want to get stuff from you where they look it up and down and go, okay, that's great, covered the bases, we'll change that word and we'll print it. Because They do enough editing regardless. I would also add, as Heather pointed out earlier, once you publish something, send the article to whoever helped you out with it. And sometimes, even the people who didn't help you out and just happen to be mentioned in the article. You know, you're building a circle of goodwill, and it comes back to you in the end. Key number 9, diversify, diversify, diversify. Sometimes people ask me, you know, as a travel writer, is it better to be a specialist or a generalist? My answer is yes. You want to be both. It's just better for your sanity. Like, I mean, obviously I look like Mr. Hockey Fanatic here, but I don't want to write about hockey all the time. The variety keeps me stimulated. And it's also better for your bank account. I love my mom and dad, but I also love not living in their basement. Something could happen that limits your ability to write about your chosen specialty. Your favorite editor could, you know, retire, get fired. The publication that you write for most could go belly up. We see that all the time now. Or there could just be a decrease in interest in a destination that you're writing about. Sadly, it's probably hard to sell an article on Brussels right now. So be open to possibilities. At the end of the day, it's all writing and it all pays your bills. Because travel really encompasses life. I'll give you a few examples. A travel writing friend of mine who doubled as the editor of Real Weddings magazine asked me to interview a couple about their 1950s rock and roll themed wedding. I'd never really written about weddings before, but I did it. A Vancouver photographer came to me and said, "Do you want to profile Nickelback singer Chad Kroeger for Celebrity Car magazine?" Now, I'm not the world's biggest Nickelback fan, nor do I own a platoon of luxury cars, but again, I did it. You have to be open. Once I saw an online ad looking for a writer to cover dental conferences at the Vancouver Convention Center for Asian Dentist magazine. And yes, that is a real magazine. The magazine of 30,000 dental professionals in the Asia-Pacific region. Now, I brush, I floss regularly, but that's the extent of my dental expertise. Very important, very important. Especially with our health benefits. But you know what? It's a case where if you ask the right questions and you listen to the experts, you can write about almost anything, except maybe nuclear physics. I stay away from that. And so I applied, and they were like, "Great, you live 15 minutes away. You have the assignment, sir. Please go do it." And I covered that conference for a few years. So let me say it again. Diversify, diversify, diversify. If you want to freelance as long as I have, it's a great creed to live by. Key number 10, focus on your craft. First and foremost, I'm a huge believer in being good at what you do. Spend more time writing than trying to toot your own horn about what you're doing. If you're good enough, people will come to you in the long haul, and you won't have any trouble paying your bills. Do the work. That's what counts. The writing that you do is always better than the writing you don't do. If there's one thing that you take away from today, I'd like that to be it. Not just the fact that I wore this lovely souvenir from the Hershey Tourist. Let me recap my 10 keys here. Key number 1, write about what you care about. Key number 2, write about what's topical. Key number 3, be original. Key number 4, be opportunistic. Key number 5, put yourself out there. Key number 6, inject a personal touch. Key number 7, don't be afraid to recycle. Key number 8, act like a pro, get treated like a pro. Key number 9, diversify, diversify, diversify. And key number 10, focus on your craft. Thank you for your time and attention. Now I'm going to find out who was actually listening and give away the chocolate. Are you people with me?
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
My question is, what are the 3 questions you need to answer in each query you send out to an editor? Ariane, go ahead.
Yeah. Your special angle, why are you the ideal person for the job, and why is the story relevant now?
Nicely done. Please. Come get your shot. This is so Canadian. Like, look at that picture. There's maple syrup. They're in
like greeting cards.
So you're welcome. Good work. Good work. Oh, okay. The official presentation.
Why aren't you reading number 8?
Never mind.
One more.
Cute.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm all out of official speech here, so I guess this is the point.
Let's have some question and answers. Anybody got questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I know you're going to be staying mostly print, but in terms of digital versus print, editors don't have a lot of time, I would gather, to look through an entire one-page pitch. Is that true or false? When you typically send a pitch to an editor with the caption, subtitle, or subject title, where are they grasping for the 2 paragraphs? What are they looking for most? Like, launch a lot of content to pitch, or can it be done in 2 succinct paragraphs?
I have to say, it varies. And it depends whether you're pitching somebody that you know before or pitching somebody totally cold. I often, personally, like to give an editor that I've never worked with before a little bit of a sense of what I can do. And you can do that in your clips, and you know, it's nice if you can say I work for this magazine or that magazine that they will recognize. But you also need to be able to show that you can do for them what you've done for these other publications. And they don't necessarily know how much editing your work is going through. So what I'm saying is, sometimes my pitches are not always just like 75 words in and out. Yeah. Sometimes I like to give a few paragraphs that give a real feel for what the story is going to be like. You know, the hook, a few actual factoids. Again, if you have a relationship, they know what you can do. Sometimes just a couple of sentences will do it, where you hook them on the basic idea, and they already know that you can execute it. I've even sometimes, because as you see, I do a lot of wacky story ideas. Sometimes I realize, you know what, this story is not going to be very easy to explain. It would be better for me to just go write the damn story and then let them see if they want it. So it varies.
I have a question,
Yes.
and that is, let's talk about your wacky writing.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, I mean, you develop a reputation for a certain style, but Lucas, when you first started out, decades ago or whatever, years ago.
Yeah, back in the 20th century. What a century it was, too. Like a couple of wars, but there was a lot of good guys.
So, what I'm saying is, was it a tough sell, your particular brand of writing, or did you start straight and then gradually evolve once you had built up a reputation with the editors?
I would say that maybe the topics that I explored back then were a little bit less esoteric at the start, but I was always finding ways to come up with hybrid topics. Like, I joked about fashion, but I actually wrote about fashion for 6 years. I covered Vancouver Fashion Week and BC Fashion Week, and interviewed Patricia Fieldwalker in Gastown about her bias-cut silk French chemises for Julia Roberts and Sharon Stone.
Did you make that up, or did you know what you were talking about?
Well, I asked the right questions. You know, you shut up and you ask the editors, or the experts, I should say, to let them fill you in on what you need to know. But I would do things like, my first fashion article really stemmed out of hockey, because Wayne Gretzky came to the Bay on Georgia Street to launch his signature menswear line. And I had just seen this ad online saying, you know, we're a Texas fashion website. We pay 50 cents US a word, which was pretty good back then, especially because the exchange was like what it is now. It's like, well, how do I get in on this action? And I was able to use hockey as my conduit, because I'm like, you know, I'm a hockey journalist. I know all about Wayne Gretzky. I can do his fashion line. And then they get back to me and say, well, this is a good article. We actually have no other correspondents in Canada. Can you let us know what's going on up there with like the polar bear skin coats and whatever? And, it just kind of spiraled from there.
So a follow-up question is,